The transfer portal is officially open for business, and there is no dull moment happening in college football right now, and Mississippi State's not immune from that. The Bulldogs have had a lot of highs and a lot of lows so far in the transfer portal. Right now, currently, Mississippi State feeling good about itself in a lot of ways after what's been transpiring as far as announcements are concerned. I'm going to give a little bit of a timeline of what's been going down for Mississippi State since the last weekend or a week of November, since Mississippi State was able to bring back home the Golden Egg Trophy and the battle for the Golden Egg against Ole Miss. Mississippi State's seen a lot of good news, as I said, and there's been a few bad pieces of information come out from Mississippi State as far as the roster for 2023 is concerned. But this is going to be the norm for teams around college football in this new age of football, with the name, image, and likeness that's been happening across the landscape, and players getting deals and money being exchanged and things like that. And also the transfer portal, where you're granted one free season of eligibility, I guess, when you transfer to another school. And as we've seen, that hasn't exactly been the case as far as being penalized for transferring for a second time. We've seen several guys being able to play immediately, even if they transferred multiple times. JT Daniels, one of those guys who's transferring now, I think for the third or fourth time, and is going to have the opportunity to play again next year. So let's talk about where things stand for Mississippi State as we sit here on December the 9th, 2022. We are a few weeks away from the early signing period, which has lost a little bit of its luster since the transfer portal has come in. Mississippi State's hosting a lot of high school athletes. They're also hosting JUCO players and even transfer portal players coming up this weekend. And you can find out all about that on our site, MississippiState247sports.com. Paul Jones has the lowdown on all those official visitors coming in this weekend for Mississippi State, who to watch for, who Mississippi State's targeting in the transfer portal, and also some of the top high school recruits as well. Let's start with the announcements that have come out in the past few weeks for Mississippi State, and we'll also discuss kind of who's in the transfer portal right now for the Bulldogs and possibly who could be on board for Mississippi State moving forward from elsewhere. So Mississippi State wins the Egg Bowl trophy back for the first time since 2019. A lot of positive momentum came from that for the Bulldogs, being able to bring that trophy back home for the first time since that 2019 season and that wild Egg Bowl that transpired with Elijah Moore hiking the leg and getting the personal foul penalty. This one was also a strange ball game as well. You know, Will Rogers going in for a touchdown, possibly. State had the ball at the 2-yard line and fumbled it away to Ole Miss. And what was about to be a 2-touchdown lead for Mississippi State, instead, you give the ball back to the Rebels. They drive down the field. They score, get the ball game to 2 points. And Randy Charlton, of course, knocks the ball down the 2-point conversion attempt to win the ball game for Mississippi State. So Bulldogs win the Egg in Oxford, come back, and you start seeing these announcements come out for Mississippi State quite unexpectedly for the most part. I don't know how many people felt like some of these defensive players would return for another season, but Buki Watson is the first one to kind of break the ice. The leader of the defense at linebacker, leads the SEC in tackles this season, and Watson announces on November 30th that he's going to return for another season. That, thanks in large part to the Bulldog Initiative, Mississippi State striking an NIL deal with Watson to return for another season. Then you got another big announcement. Jaden Crumedy, defensive tackle, who's going to return for a sixth season as well. Both of those guys, two of the best players on the defense. Crumedy missed most of this season with an injury. Getting him back is absolutely huge. I thought by the end of the season, when he returned in those last 4 or 5 games, whenever he had come back, I thought the defense just looked different. The numbers might not be there for Crumedy, but he does so much for the defense that I think his impact is felt in a much larger way than what he's doing individually on the stat sheet. So huge piece there as well, joining Nate Watson, was Jaden Crumedy. Then the next day, Jordan Davis comes out, another defensive player, defensive end who's been a backup but valuable off the bench. He's coming off of an ACL injury this year, and I thought provided some really good reps off the bench for Mississippi State. He's a huge piece returning because he can compete now for a starting spot with Randy Charlton heading out for Mississippi State, Jordan Davis could very well slide into that starting position at defensive end, and that's a huge piece returning. Also, another backup defensive lineman, Nathan Pickering, who has provided a real big spark off the bench for Mississippi State in 4 years. Former four-star recruit. We've seen flashes from him. He hadn't quite put it all together to hit where he was projected to hit coming out of high school, but this is a guy with NFL potential on the defensive line in the middle that has really flashed in the middle to be a potential starter for State, maybe at nose tackle, maybe even a backup defensive tackle. Who knows where they put him, but he's obviously a huge part of things for Mississippi State and a defensive line that was losing 2 starters in Cameron Young and also Randy Charlton. So getting those pieces back were huge. Also on that day, Cam Jones, the starting right tackle, announces he's returning to Mississippi State. So you have all of this positive momentum coming in for the 2023 roster with these defensive guys, and then the offensive lineman and Cam Jones, who's a 3rd or 4th year starter, coming in for the Bulldogs. This is huge to get all those pieces back and get that positive momentum after you have the Egg Bowl. Just really big news. The first bit of negative information that came out on December 2nd, the next day after all those positive announcements, Ra Thomas, the team's leading receiver, announces he's transferring. Was a bit of a shock. There was some noise out there on the internet that he was possibly going to enter the portal, but it was kind of hard to tell if that was true or not. And then started kind of bowling over a little bit, and Ra announces he's going to enter the portal. The information that we got was that had negotiated a deal with the Bulldog Initiative, very similar to what we heard Tulu Griffin had gotten, and we'll talk about Tulu here in a second. But Ra apparently was not happy with some of the numbers. He decided to hit the portal. He's immediately been getting some offers out there. Georgia, Auburn, Ole Miss, I think 3 of the top teams that are after him. Visiting Auburn, visiting Ole Miss, probably going to go to Georgia as well. So he's going to be a hot commodity. That's obviously a loss for Mississippi State in the portal, and a little bit of bad news for the Bulldogs on Friday, December 2nd. But State also got some good news that day. Starting linebacker Jet Johnson returning, joining the other defensive players, and you're starting to see a theme there. The defense really, really locked in together. We haven't seen hardly anybody enter the portal from the defense, and if we do see some players, it looks like it's going to be guys that are kind of down the depth chart that are looking for better opportunities. So you're seeing it, a little bit. We're starting to hear some noise on the offensive side of the ball. Some guys are unhappy. Some guys looking to transfer. Players are wanting different roles in the offense, more increased roles in the offense. And the defense, those guys have just kind of been locked in together. So you're seeing kind of a separation of 2 different sides of the ball there, and kind of their mindset and where things are right now. And that stuff would build later on in the week into this week. But on that same day, Tulu Griffin, the Bulldog Initiative, announced they have a partnership with Tulu. For a couple of days leading up to that, Tulu had really been hammering on Twitter the transfer portal for Mississippi State, kind of recruiting just about everybody that popped in. It was obvious that he was kind of locked in to Mississippi State, and there had been, what concerns there might have been that he might be going had been rectified, because he was really recruiting hard for Mississippi State among as hard among anybody else has ever recruited for Mississippi State on Twitter as far as players are concerned. He's kind of right up there with those guys. So obviously Tulu, that was a big thing to get him locked in, big piece of the offense, and a lot of people were concerned that he might hit the transfer portal after not seeing as many carries or catches as he wanted to get this year, but he's obviously locked in, and he's starting to pick up some All-American and All-SEC honors after what he did as a returner this year. One of the best seasons we've ever seen from a player as a kick returner this year. So he's coming back for another year, and that's where things were heading into the new week. There began to smoke kind of began to bellow a little bit moving into the new week about wide receiver Xavion Thomas and also the running backs, both Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks. The word was that Dylan and Marks both wanted to see some increased carries, designed runs from this offense. They wanted to see, both of them really wanted to have a more prominent feature in this offense as far as running the football. These guys get the ball a lot, whether it be catching it or running it. And this year was easily their best as far as running the football. But both those guys both want to be the guy in the running game. I don't think there was any kind of dissension between those two. I think they're very close. But at the end of the day, it was one of those things where they want to be in an offense that features the running back, and they both want to be kind of the starting guy. And so something comes to a head eventually on that. They have been loyal to Mississippi State for 3 years. I don't think anybody can question how hard they've played for 3 years, fought through injuries. They played really hard in an offense they didn't sign up for. They were recruited by Joe Moorhead to run the spread. They stuck to their word, played for Mississippi State in this air raid, and both of those guys, if Dylan Johnson would have stayed at Mississippi State, he and Marks would have been 1 and 2 as far as career receptions at Mississippi State. But these guys want to run the football. And so Dylan Johnson decides to transfer. He decided to transfer, I think, late last week, maybe early this week. But apparently, and I mean, this has been confirmed by a recording that is making its rounds. Somebody recorded Mike Leach making a comment about Dylan Johnson not being tough enough and Leach being actually glad that he's leaving. So Dylan Johnson announces on Wednesday he's leaving Mississippi State and in the transfer portal. And in the middle of his statement that he put out on Twitter on the graphic, he mentions since he's not tough enough and Mike Leach is glad he's gone, he's going to find a more suitable offense. And that caught a lot of people by surprise. I don't think anybody has seen an announcement quite like that. So that was very shocking when it first came out, and then news started kind of circulating around back channels of the internet that there was this video, and that video has now made its way across the internet of Mike Leach mentioning those things about Dylan Johnson. So there was a huge negative response to that towards Leach, towards Dylan Johnson by some people, towards whoever was videoing that by some people. And behind the scenes, I can tell you with 100% confidence that there was a lot of, I guess you could say, not happy Mississippi State players behind the scenes. There were a lot of players that were contemplating leaving. And I'm not exactly sure what calmed the masses down or what kind of settled things, but the next day everything was kind of, taken care of. And everybody seems to be on the same page, and there hasn't been any issues following that. I want to make it clear that Dylan Johnson was not leaving Mississippi State because of what Mike Leach said. That was said before. He was leaving before Mike Leach had said all those things. So that didn't play a factor into him leaving. Something that Mike Leach might have said to him previously, maybe, but that specific conversation did not happen until after Dylan had said he was leaving Mississippi State. So that's what happened with all of that. Dylan Johnson is now in the transfer portal, and Mississippi State is trying to fight to keep Jaquavius Marks. So moving into Thursday, after all the running back drama started to circulate there on Wednesday night, Xavier Thomas came out and continued that kind of negative news from Mississippi State, announcing he was hitting the transfer portal. Like I said, this was kind of rumored earlier in the week that Thomas was homesick. He was trying to get closer to home. This had nothing to do with Dylan Johnson's announcement or anything like that. This is completely separate. But continue that trend of those offensive players moving out. Ra Thomas, Dylan Johnson, now Xavier Thomas. 3 guys that are really talented and had a bright future moving into 2023, but are all moving on. And then you had the possibility of Woody Marks also leaving. And from what I understand, about midweek, there was a high possibility that could happen, that Woody Marks was going to move on. Mississippi State put in a lot of effort to keep Woody. Jason Washington went to Atlanta to see Woody and his family, kind of reassure him that just how important he is for this offense. He's got that lead back role. waiting for him next season. And Mississippi State was able to convince Marks to return for another season. Just a huge, huge addition to Mississippi State's roster in 2023. And Marks announced on Friday morning that that was what he was going to do. And so really pushes things back into the positive territory for Mississippi State moving into 23. Because now you don't have to go out there and try to find possibly 2 transfer running backs. You could get another transfer guy to help the depth that you have at running back, but you're in pretty good shape there. You got 2 solid running backs with experience in Jaquavius Marks and then Simeon Price, who was really good in 2022 as a redshirt freshman. You got Seth Davis coming in, who is just killing it over in Texas for Katy, and they have an opportunity to get to a state championship and possibly win another state title in the next couple of weeks. He had 300 yards rushing last week, 6 touchdowns, just a huge season for him. And a guy that really fits this offense. He could be a player that gets some playing time next year. If not, you have a junior college transfer in Jeffrey Pittman from Hines Community College coming in that I think really gives you a really nice depth piece. So that's 3 guys at least right there for State next year that you feel good about. I think they want to get a transfer running back, but it's not as dire as it was a couple of days ago. And Kavasio Smoke for Kentucky is one of those guys that I think is a possibility for Mississippi State, was the backup running back at Kentucky, had a solid career there, and would be a nice bridge piece for some of those younger running backs to get prepared when Marks leaves and also if Smoke leaves as well. So that's kind of where things stand right now with the up and down nature of this news from Mississippi State. And just to kind of let you know who all is in the portal at this point. I've mentioned the main names, and also you can add in there a guy like Archer Trafford, who was one of State's punters the last couple of years and had a really solid career at Mississippi State for a couple of seasons as a walk-on. He's entered the portal. You also have other offensive pieces like backup wide receiver Christian Ford. You have Contravion Hargrove, who was the 4th-string running back this past year. Daniel Greek, who was running 4th or 5th team at quarterback this season. You got long snapper Rex Robich, who's a walk-on. Matai Afa, a walk-on defensive lineman. Offensive lineman Gabe Cavazos, Reed Byes, and Carson Williams. And let's see who else. I think that's it. I think State's got 13 guys in the portal right now, which is kind of normal in the SEC. There's a lot of roster turnover with this stuff. But most of these guys are guys that are down the depth chart a little bit. There's a few big pieces, but State's got a chance to replace those pieces. They got a tremendous wide receiver coming in next weekend, and Ollie Jennings coming in from Old Dominion. It looks like they're battling Virginia Tech and Duke for him, but a guy that I think can come in and replace the production of Ra Thomas. If you're looking to replace some defensive backs out of the portal, they have a familiar name in Radarius Jones, who played at Horn Lake. If a lot of you guys remember that Horn Lake team that won the state championship a few years ago, Radar was the quarterback of that team that beat John Rice Plumlee in Oak Grove in Hattiesburg 4 years ago now. He was in the same class as Nakobe Dean. Was at LSU. Looks like he's coming in for a visit next week. Mississippi State's kind of trending for him. And then you have other pieces. You have offensive linemen that are about to come in for Mississippi State to potentially compete on the offensive line. You got defensive backs, other defensive backs that are coming in. So State's got a chance to kind of reload the offense and the defense a little bit and fill in those missing holes for this team to be really good in 23. I've been saying all along, I feel like this team has a chance to be really good for Mississippi State next year. I think the schedule sets up pretty nice. I think it's a solid schedule. You got 8 home games. You get a lot of guys returning on the offense and defense. And, you keep Zach Arnett as long as nobody else comes in here and tries to get him. And this could be a pretty special year for the Bulldogs. This could be one of those years where they're competing in the top half of the SEC West, which finished 3rd this year. I mean, you beat LSU and you beat Kentucky and you finish 2nd in the SEC West, tied with Alabama, if you were able to win those games that were quite winnable. So things are going in the right direction for Mississippi State. They got an Egg Bowl win. They have a chance now to win this bowl game. It looks like they're going to have a good portion of the roster available for that game. They're going to be missing out on Emmanuel Forbes and Dylan Johnson for sure as far as big names. Of course, Xavier Thomas as well, but you're probably going to have Tulu Griffin back there returning punts, so it's probably a net positive for you with Tulu returning those punts. So I mean, you're losing Ra Thomas. You got some wide receivers there that can step up. So State's going to have a pretty good roster going to Tampa on January 2nd, as long as nobody gets injured or anybody else enters the portal. Got a chance to win 9 games, get some really positive momentum going into the season, get some transfer portals additions. They really need to land Isaac Smith from Itawamba, the safety, 4-star that looks like he's going to choose between State and LSU. Taking his LSU visit this weekend, State needs to survive that, and they really need to win that battle. Do all that, and there's going to be a lot of season tickets sold next year and a lot of excitement around that team. So as of right now, the momentum is positive for Mississippi State. That can change in a day. This stuff's changing like the wind, and of course we'll keep you up to date over there on 247, so make sure you're locked in over there. But otherwise, everything going pretty okay, if that's a statement that I can use for Mississippi State. So things are steadying out for the Bulldogs. Some exciting times coming up with the bowl game on January 2nd. Some exciting times coming up beyond that as well. So make sure you're tuned in. Basketball's in full force at Mississippi State, and a lot of good things happening there. And we'd love to have you if you're not a member over at 247 as well. Other than that, appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.